to another ASMR topics lesson. Just kidding. I have always wanted to do that. Oh my god. Can you imagine if I did a lesson in ASMR? That would kind of slap, not gonna lie. I have a nice voice. I could make it work a little bit. I could bust out my phone and just do some tapping while I'm talking about statistics. That would be incredible. No, that's not going to happen. Welcome, everyone, to the last topics lesson of the year. I didn't think I would be doing it from my bedroom, but here we are. I hope everything has been going well for all of you, for the few who have stuck around to put up with my PowerPoint buffoonery. So I just want to end the year by doing something a little different. We're not doing a lesson from the book this week, just because I'm feeling a little fatigued from just random vocab and slight variations on things that you've already learned about in elementary and middle school. I wanted to do something a little different today, something maybe a little more relevant, but just lighter. So an 800 number just left me a voicemail, and I'm like, please leave me alone. Um, so today we are going to be talking about accuracy in data, and I just want to get right down to that for today. So there are two topics I want to cover. Get it? Topics, wink, wink. Um, First is, how can data fall above or below expectations? So if we have a certain, understanding of where our data is going to fall, and if it's going outside of that, how can we justify that and explain why that happens? And the other one is that, how can we make sure our data is accurate if results seem off? So if something seems kind of weird, what can we do to kind of correct ourselves and make sure that we're doing the right thing? And so I'm going to be framing that through three problems today. And let's just get right down to it. So problem one, I've got my three besties, Lynn, Kieran, and Diego. They're going to shoot some basketball today. I can't wait to try and make this work. Like, I'm a gay person that's trying to talk about basketball right now. I'm so sorry to all of you right now. Anyways, so Lynn, Kieran, and Diego, they are going to shoot 100 free throws for a practice session today. They're going out to the court, they're shooting some hoops, and they're going to shoot 100 free throws. Now, based on their shooting in the past, my good guy Lynn, he thinks that they all have kind of a similar ability. And Lynn estimates that they each have about 60% of a chance of making each shot. So if they're shooting 100 shots, they should be able to make around 60 ish. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, but in that bracket somewhere. So they each shoot their shots. Let's see how it turns out. So Lynn, he makes 63 shots out of the 100, which is good for him. Like, that is spot on, in terms of estimating something like this, being that close to your bracket is awesome, and I think it's pretty commendable. So good for him. Then Kieran shoots his shots. He makes 75, and now, it's kind of off. It's a little higher than expected, but it's still kind of in that 10 to 20% range of what was expected. So I think that's still pretty okay in a scenario like this. A little off, but nothing crazy. And then my last guy, poor Diego, he only makes 35 of the 100 shots. Now, this is where things get kind of weird. And I want to ask, from these results that we've got, is Lynn's estimate accurate for the chance of each person making each shot? So is this 60% percentage that's applied to all three of them, is that a good estimate for all of them? And the way I see it is that you can either easily agree to this or easily disagree. I'm going to play devil's advocate today and just kind of see what's going on from both sides. So I'm going to give potential arguments for each one. So let's say we're in the agree tab. We think, yes, Lynn, you are on point with that 60% estimate. This is great. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to back you up on this. One thing I think about is that Lynn and Kieran are still very close. Diego could easily be an outlier in this situation. Yeah, he was off, but Lynn still managed to properly estimate himself and Kieran. He got 2 out of 3 in this scenario, which, for some of you, having the majority correct or mostly accurate could be all that you need to justify that something is worthwhile, you know? Yeah, he really messed up on Diego, but he estimated himself pretty amazingly and Kieran pretty okay. He got 2 out of 3. That's pretty good. Another thing that I think about, just because I'm a Scorpio and I, have a lot of detective energy in me, I'm trying to find out the truth, is that Diego's numbers could be low for contextual reasons. Maybe he has been awesome and performing in that 60% range for the past couple of weeks or days. And maybe today was just a bad day for him. The sun could have been in his eyes, or a scary movie coming out in the next couple of weeks got pushed back because of COVID, or, his significant other just dumped him because they haven't seen each other in 3 months and they realize that they're not good for each other. All these sorts of things could have happened that could have thrown off his game. And so I always love to read into the details that are not spoken about because I think those are important as well. There could be a lot of contextual things going on with Diego that could have just thrown him off in that specific moment. We don't know. I'm just making assumptions, but I think it's a pretty okay assumption to make. Now, you could be on the disagree side. You could say, Lynn, I think you're full of shit. That 60% estimate that you applied to all three of yourselves does not work at all. And I'm going to tell you why. For one thing, a big red flag I would raise is that Lynn's estimate, is it based on data or is it just his rough memory? Did he sit on the sidelines for the past couple of weeks and say, okay, Lynn, okay, Diego, okay, Kieran, here's what we've all got for all these days. Here's how many shots you shot on Monday, how many on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all that. And I made a big average of it. Did he really actually collect this data and get that 60% estimate from actual things that have happened? Or is it just based on some fuzzy memories he had? Like, yeah, we did pretty good that day and we did pretty good that other day. I'd say we're about 60%. That seems to be what it is. Is it just a real rough estimate that's going on that he can't really back up with anything else? Another thing I would consider is that his estimate did not consider Diego at all. Maybe he's only been focusing on himself, which that was the closest estimate, and maybe a little bit with Kieran, who was also really good. Maybe he didn't even care about Diego that much because he wasn't doing that much better, so he wasn't super focused on it. It also could have been maybe an ego thing. He thought, man, I'm just doing so good, and Kieran's doing so good. Like, we're all just like at a 60 right now without even thinking about what Diego was doing at the time. So I think there are perfectly valid reasons why you could either agree or disagree with him. What you're going to notice about the problems that we talk about today is that there's a lot of gray area. There's not really a right or wrong answer. It's just all up for debate, which I love a good debate. I love arguing. I love some gray area. It's a good time. So, something to consider with all these. It could be context, it could be lack of good data, all that kind of stuff. We never really know, but it's all up for debate. Problem 2 is going to be a classic problem anytime you start talking about probability, is always flipping a coin. What's the probability that you're going to flip a heads? 50%, right? It's either going to be half tails, half heads. Maybe it might be slightly off by 1 or 2, but we know the probability is usually about 50%. That's what we've known since like elementary school. When you first start talking about probability, this is the example that comes to mind. And usually they probably had you do some type of activity where you had to flip a coin a bunch of times and write it down, which maybe if we were in school, I'd have you do it, but it's a bit elementary, it's a bit childlike. So I just went ahead and did it for us to kind of see what the numbers could be. So I recorded the amount of heads that I got by flipping a coin 20 separate times on 5 different occasions. Now, I didn't actually flip a coin because, for one thing, it's going to be noisy as hell. I'm not trying to listen to that on a table. And second, if it rolls away and I have to get up and go get it, I'm not really trying to do that either. So I used an online generator. So I used like an electronic coin. I used a website. So take that with what you will. But here was the data that I got. Now, some of it's pretty interesting. This first trial, totally on brand. I got 9. If I'm flipping it 20 times, I know that my numbers are probably going to be in maybe that 11 through 9 range. It's going to be about split half, maybe one more so than the other, but that's expected in situations like this. But then it got kind of weird on the third and fourth trials, I got 15 heads, and then I got 13 heads on those trials. The third trial I especially think is crazy because 75% is way more off than 50% in terms of a probability. And I think that's really notable here. And then at the last one, it went back to normal and I got 9 again. There was never one where I got at like equally 10 across the board, but it was mostly split, except for these 2 trials right here. Keep those in the back of your pocket. So I want to jump to my good girl Priya. So she flipped a coin 20 times and it landed on heads only twice. She got 18 tails and she got 2 heads. And I want to start by asking, is it possible for this to happen with a fair coin? And when I say fair coin, I mean there's an equal chance of landing on heads or tails. It's not like a weighted coin or an unfair one where it's going to land on one more than the other. And just based on that data, I would be a little suspect to that. Like, you know, 18 to 2 is pretty crazy when we're talking about a 50% chance of landing on something. It kind of challenges this ideal that we've been taught all this time that a coin is a 50-50 chance. It is always fair, even if they don't affect each other. Like, only 2 heads? That's kind of crazy, in my opinion. But if we want to look at the data that we've got before, maybe it doesn't seem so crazy, right? Because if I'm comparing it to what I had before, can we really suspect that it's an unfair coin when we had a situation where we got 15 heads instead? You know, that's where the questions start to come in a little bit. Because honestly, 15 isn't too off from 18. I feel like if I kept doing this a bunch of other times, I probably would have gotten 16, 17, maybe even 18 heads as well in this situation. It might take me a while, but it could potentially happen. So if I'm looking at this data, it starts to not be so suspicious anymore because I've lived this where I had some weird numbers as well. So a follow-up question to ask would be, what could Priya do to provide evidence that the coin she flipped is not a fair coin or it is a fair coin? Well, given how I handled this when I got that weird 15 in the middle, well, then I did again, went back down to 13, and then I did again, went back down to 9, went back to normal. So if you're really trying to figure out what you're doing is fair or not, just flip it some more. If you get a weird round where you roll 15 heads, 18 heads, and that seems pretty bizarre, which it is, it helps to just do a couple more trials and see, okay, is this actually consistent? Am I getting these high numbers every time, or is this just kind of a fluke every now and then? In my opinion, I feel like, if she had kept going and she had started getting 9s and 10s, then it probably would have just been a fluke. Because at the end of the day, getting, only 2 heads and 18 tails is possible. It's not very likely, but there is a slight, super small possibility that it could happen. Now, if she had kept flipping it and she was still getting those high numbers, then it might be an unfair coin, but she'd have to test it more to help. So if things are seeming kind of fishy, just do a little oh God, talking. I'm going to tell you guys right now, I've tried recording this lesson like 2 times already. I just kept messing up so much that it just felt like a mess. And I was like, this is awful. Click. So I'm just trying to make it go as smooth as possible. Okay. So if you're really suspicious about whether something might be unfair or not, especially in a probability sense, just do a couple more tests. It'll really determine what's going on. If it was just a weird moment that's an outlier out of the blue, or whether it's a more consistent thing that's going to happen. Now, our last problem today is probably my favorite of the bunch because just the way that it's framed, there's like so much melodrama under the surface. It literally feels like a subplot from like Riverdale or Degrassi. It's kind of funny. So let's spell it out. So, local news station, they want to interview 8 students from a school because, I don't know, something's going on at the school, or maybe there's a new thing going on. They want to know what's going on, whatever. And there are 25 students on the student council. Now, it's just basically assumed that if you're on the student council, you're going to know about what's going down at this school, and you're going to be a good, interviewee for the local news station. So, 25 students, they want to pick 8. Here's the thing though. 10 of the people on the student council are from the graduating class, and 15 are from other classes. So it's kind of assumed that the seniors make up the lowest majority, while freshmen, sophomores, seniors make up a much bigger majority of this student council. So that's kind of the figures going on in this case. Now, the principal, they're struggling hard to pick these 5 students from the council. So many different backgrounds and activities. Who are you going to pick? And how are you going to pick? So, principal needs to draw random names from a bowl. They decide, the only way to make it fair is if I write all your names on a piece of paper, drop them in a bowl, and I just draw 8. That's what I'm going to do. So, principal goes home, does that, comes back the next day with their selections. Now, it turns out that they've got 5 who are from the graduating class and only 3 from the other classes. Now, depending on which class you're from, you might think this is a little suspect, and that's exactly what happens. So, students who are not seniors are going to complain that this doesn't really seem fair. The seniors make up the minority of who's on the student council, yet they make up the most people who are doing this interview. What's up with that? And so they're suspecting that maybe the principal chose this group rather than selecting them at random, that this is all a lie. This was not by chance. And this is just so funny to me because there's just so much melodrama behind it. It's like, why would the principal try to do that? Like, do the seniors know more because they've been around? Like, are they going to just dish up all this dirt on the school? What's going on here? So I just think it's kind of funny. But I want to delve into this a little bit. I want to ask, do we think that the principal could have chosen the group of students at random like she promised? So, you know, did she get these weird numbers by chance? And the only way to figure that out, like we learned in problem 2, is that if we get weird results like this, let's do some more tests of our own. Let's see, is this actually a common thing that happens to get results like this? Because it seems weird, right? So I went ahead and did some for you. I probably would have had you guys do this one in class because this is a little less elementary, maybe like write a bunch of names and draw them, that kind of thing. So I used a random list generator online where I put all a bunch of names in and I assigned, who's a senior to all the names. And so I just generated a bunch of lists of 8 people and I just counted how many of them are seniors on this list. And I did this 5 times. So this is what I came up with. So I did 5 different drawings. And in my groups of 8 people that I came up with, I had 3 trials where I had 3 seniors, and 2 trials. And then I had 2 trials where I had 4 seniors, and then 1 trial where I only had 2 seniors. So this is kind of weird, right? Because in the principal situation, she drew 5 seniors in this group. And in my situation, I had 2 where I drew 4 seniors. So, kind of like with problem 2, is it really that, off kilter for me to potentially draw 1 extra senior and get 5 when I had 2 situations where I drew 4 and 2 where I drew 3? In my opinion, I think the principal is probably a little legit on this one. And when you think about it, the seniors do make up the minority on the student council, but they also make up 40% of the whole thing. You're going to get some seniors in your group of people when you draw 8 from that group. So, in my opinion, I think even though the numbers might seem off, if you do a little more testing, it might prove that maybe that's the norm after all, and it's not as weird as we think. So, just one other thing to take away. So, takeaways for this one is that there's 3 of them. First thing is that context matters. So, going back to the basketball thing, if you get weird numbers in terms of a performance of someone, so, how many free throws you shoot, how far you run, it could be a context thing. What is going on in their head? What's going on outside in the air? What are the physical conditions of the room like? All of these things can affect the performance of someone regardless of what some probability or previous numbers are. That can always factor in. And that's because I'm a sleuth. I'm a Scorpio, got that detective energy, but context does matter. It's not just a Scorpio thing. So Number two is that off-kilter results are weird, but they're still possible. So if you're flipping a coin a bazillion times and you flip it 20 times and you happen to get 18 tails and 2 heads, that's weird for sure, but it is possible at the end of the day because all the coin tosses are totally independent of each other. They don't affect each other, and it's weird, but it could happen. And if you did it, a ton of trials, you'll eventually get some result like that. And the last one is that when in doubt, test again. If you really think something is weird in terms of the results that you get, doing a frequent test over and over again to check for that is going to reinforce whether, the model that you've currently got is right or if it's wrong. So with that 60% thing on the basketball boys, maybe it just happened to be a bad round and then they do one the next day and they're all in that 60 range. They're never going to know unless they try again. So it's only going to help you to keep testing and testing, which is what happens for all sorts of things, especially a certain vaccine that, hurry up, y'all. We need it. We need it right now. So I hope this could be kind of just an okay, lax lesson for the end of the school year. Your assignment is just going to be just a couple problems that kind of deal with this thing where it's asking, the accuracy of that kind of thing. So that is all I've got for now. So I hope you all finish the year strong. I'm super proud of you all. And I'm going to try and figure out some way to stay in touch. So, yeah, ideas are flowing right now. It's currently Monday, so I'm going to send out my email tomorrow. We'll see what goes down. But I hope you all are surviving okay and have a good one.